Chapter 26 of the Boy Scouts' First Camp Fire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rachel. The Boy Scouts' First Camp Fire by Herbert Carter. Chapter 26. A Signal Station in a Treetop. "Oh, that's the finest thing that ever could happen, Thad," was the way the delighted Smithy put his feelings into words. "And just to think that right here you can make use of scout knowledge to tell Allan what's happened. Why, without the wigwag telegraph we'd never be able to let him know one single thing." "Just what I was thinking myself, Smithy," returned the scoutmaster. "And as you get deeper into the splendid things a Boy Scout is supposed to learn while he climbs the ladder, you'll find that never a day passes but what he can help himself or some other fellow by what he knows." "I'm quite certain about that, Thad," Smithy went on, brimming over with satisfaction and wonder at the cleverness of his chum. "Why, I was just thinking it all over this morning, and what great chances a scout has to do things that an ordinary boy would never be able to even try, because he has not learned. Right now I'm positive I know how to best stop a runaway horse without endangering my life more than is absolutely necessary." "That's the kind of talk I like to hear, Smithy. It shows that you understand what the scout movement stands for, and mean to make the most of the opportunities." "Then suppose a chum of mine got into the water, and was taken with a cramp," Smithy went on hurriedly, his blue eyes sparkling with delight. "Why, after what you showed me this morning, I believe that as soon as I know a little more about swimming, I could get him ashore." "And when had you done that?" questioned Thad, who was meanwhile keeping his eyes around him for the purpose of discovering the best tree which he could use as a signal tower in the carrying out of his bold plan for communicating with the balance of the Silver Fox Patrol. "Why, I wrote down every little thing you did when showing us how to revive a partly drowned person, and Thad, I practiced on a dummy when nobody was around to laugh. I'm positive I have it down pat, and could do the business." "Laugh?" repeated the pleased scoutmaster. "I'd just like to see any scout under my control make fun of a fellow who was so much in earnest that he devoted some of his spare minutes to practicing the art of saving a human life. I hope you may never have to put that knowledge to practical use, Smithy, but if the occasion ever does come along, I firmly believe you'll be equal to it. I'm more than pleased at the earnest way you've taken hold of these things." "Thank you, Thad," replied Smithy, actually with tears in his eyes. "But if I have, you can lay it partly to the fact that up to now I've been half starved in respect to all the things that most boys know and do, and just wild to learn, and also that I've had the finest chum that ever drew breath to coach me. Oh, yes, there are dozens of other things I've learned that are bound to widen the horizon of any boy. It was a fortunate day for me when you coaxed my mother to let me join the Boy Scouts. Nobody else could have done it but you, Thad." Smithy was growing more and more excited, and Thad thought best to end that sort of talk. Besides, the time and place were hardly suited for an exchange of opinions with respect to the advantages of the scout movement. "We'll talk it over another time, Smithy," he said kindly. "Just now we ought to bend our minds wholly on finding the right sort of tree for my wigwag station. Come along, and let's take a look at that tree just up the bank yonder. Seems to me it ought to answer my purpose." So he led the way to the tree in question, which happened to be close by. It was little effort for Thad to climb up into the branches, leaving Smithy below, with directions to return to the beach, when he heard a whistle from his chief, it being Thad's idea that the presence of someone below might draw attention to his flag work above, and interrupt the message. The higher he climbed the better he was satisfied, for he found that the tree was dead from a point halfway up, and consequently there was a stronger chance that he could manage to attract the attention of Allan, on the hill a mile and a half away. Finding the perch that seemed to answer his purpose best, Thad broke off a few small dead branches that threatened to interfere with the free use of his arm. After that he gave the whistle to let Smithy know the signal man was fixed, and that he had better go back to the beach to wait. As yet he had seen nothing of Allan. The bald top of the hill was in plain sight from where the scoutmaster sat, perched aloft, but scanned it in vain. Thad would not allow himself to doubt that presently the second in command of the patrol would show up there. He knew Allan was a stickler for obeying orders to the very letter, and if his superior had said that he should reach the crown of that hill at exactly 7 minutes after 10, the chances were 50 to 1 Allan would make his appearance on the second, or there would be trouble in the camp. So to amuse himself while waiting, Thad turned partly around and looked after Davy. At first he was astonished not to see the floating log on the troubled surface of the lake, to leeward, where it had been moving at a pretty fast clip when the scout messenger left the island. He experienced a sudden sensation of alarm, but immediately took a fresh grip on himself. Surely the waves were not so very boisterous now, for the wind seemed to be diminishing, if anything, and Davy was a pretty fair swimmer, all things considered. Thad presently gave expression to a little sigh of relief, for far away, just under the fringe of trees bordering the extreme end of Lake Omega, he had discovered a moving object. It was the flash of a breaking wave over the same that had attracted his attention first, and he now made out the floating log. Then Davy must have made much better time than he, Thad, had expected would be the case. No doubt he had assisted the progress of his novel craft, by swimming, being desirous of reaching land as soon as possible. So Thad divided his time between the bald top of the signal station hill, and the log that, as he knew, concealed the swimming scout. "There he goes, creeping through the shallow water and heading for the bank," he presently muttered to himself in a pleased way, "and I can give a pretty good guess that right now Davy is the happiest fellow in the country, because he just loves adventure of any kind, and he's sure getting his fill. There, he pulls himself up on the shore and ducks behind that bunch of brush. Good boy, Davy, that ought to count for a merit mark, all right. Nobody could have done it better, and few as well." After that Davy vanished from his sight. He knew that the other was making for camp at his best speed, but as he had a difficult task, with the way so rough, it must be a couple of hours at least before he could expect to bring up at the tents, where the flag floated gaily from the mast. Turning wholly so as to devote his full attention to the signal station hill, Thad counted the minutes that seemed to drag so heavily. Once or twice he thought he had heard some sort of rustling sound down on the island somewhere. He hoped that nothing was happening to Smithy, but of course it was utterly out of the question for him to call aloud, to inquire whether the tenderfoot scout was safe. "He ought to be showing up soon now," Thad was muttering as he kept watch of the smooth hilltop. "Every minute lost counts now. I hope nothing has happened in camp to disarrange the program I laid out." He had hardly spoken when he started, and a pleased look came over his anxious face, for at last there was a movement on the bald top of the elevation, as if something might be doing. Yes, a human figure was climbing steadily upward, now and then stopping to make some sort of gesture to an unseen comrade at the base of the hill, either with his arm or one of the signal flags he carried. Eagerly Thad watched the ascent of his chum. He knew that Allan was carrying the precious field glasses, for he saw the sun glint from their lens when the other stopped to take a survey. Oh, if he would only look toward the island now, for Thad was already waving his handkerchief up and down, and ready to make a certain signal which had often been used as a sign of importance between himself and his chum from Maine. Once Allan detected it, he would know instantly that the person waving was the scoutmaster, and that he had news of great importance to communicate. But it seemed as if Allan were devoting all his attention to the other quarter, where he doubtless anticipated seeing the second signalman begin to tell him that the station was ready to receive messages. Still, knowing that 3 of the patrol had gone that very morning to the mysterious island, to investigate further into the strange things it seemed to hide, it would seem that presently Allan must turn his head, and sweep the shore of the same with his glasses. Ordinary curiosity should cause him to do that, Thad thought as he waited, waving his handkerchief and fixing his eyes on the faraway figure of the khaki-clad scout with the flags. He even found himself hoping that the one sent to a more distant station might meet with some unexpected delay on the way, so that, becoming weary of looking for a sign, Allan would presently amuse himself by taking a view of other quarters. 5 minutes later, and Thad's heart gave a throb. He could see that his wish was coming true, for the sun flashed more brightly than ever as it glanced from the moving lens of the field glass. Allan was now surveying the landscape around him, and gradually his attention must be drawing nearer the island. So Thad began to make the circular movement, followed by a downward plunge of his handkerchief, that would surprise Allan when he noticed it, for he was bound to understand what it signified. A few seconds of suspense, and then Thad breathed with relief. He had seen the other focus his glasses straight towards the tree, in the dead upper branches of which he, Thad, was clinging, and wildly waving his improvised signal flag. "He sees me! Good for that!" Thad said to himself, while his heart was pounding wildly within its prison, because of the excitement that had seized him in its grip. End of chapter 26.